Let's give it a shot. Okay, it looks like we're streaming. Looks like we are live. Okay, so Conan, thank you for coming on. We are going to today be. Wait, are we streaming? This. Hold on. Okay. Now we're streaming. Okay, good. So, Conan, all right, thanks for coming on. The question that we are going to tackle is, can a person be both racist and a principled libertarian? It's an important question because it seems like there are a lot of people who are supremacists of one kind or another, racial supremacists who also claim to be libertarians. I personally do believe that you can, and I think it's been dealt with. But I wanted to hear you. I guess you believe that it's impossible, and I wanted to give you a chance to lay that out. So yeah. So thanks for coming on and taking the time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And again, you're absolutely correct. It is a very important topic that needs to be discussed, especially with the large number of people that lean more towards, like you said, white supremacist or forms of nationalism that are trying to take a libertarian handle. So that is definitely something we need to be discussed. And it is something that has been discussed by many people many times. But yeah, I really appreciate you for giving me the opportunity to speak my opinion on the matter.
So let's. I think one of the things, we were kind of trying to hash this out on Twitter, but maybe maybe it wasn't the appropriate forum. But since we're here, I think one of the things that we were running into when we were on Twitter. So I think before that we go into either laying out our thesis, if we could agree on, because as you said before we came on, that it is important that we put in there a principled libertarian. So can a person be both racist and a principled libertarian? So before we begin, if you wouldn't mind, I think it would be sort of helpful for both myself and for the guests if we could get, or for the audience, I should say, if we could get a definition, that we're agreeing upon, in this case for racist and principled libertarian. So I pulled up a definition of racist. I don't know. Can you see that there? I can read it if it's not super clear on your screen.
Sure.
And I
A
don't know if
person
either
who
one of
shows or
these.
feels discrimination or prejudice against people of other races or who believes that a particular race is superior to another, showing or feeling discrimination or prejudice against people of other races. Yeah,
You're good with that?
sounds pretty accurate.
You're good with that
Yep,
definition?
that's a
Okay.
fairly
So a
accurate form
person
of
who shows or feels discrimination or prejudice against people of other races, or who believes that a
people of
particular
other
race is
races.
superior to another. Okay. So that's good for racist. And I think most people
Sure.
are cool with that one. Libertarian's a little harder to lock down. I mean, the definition there was like an adherent of libertarianism, or a person who believes in the doctrine of
Right.
free will. That still, I don't think, is enough. There is this in
Sure.
Wikipedia. I don't know if this is, if that'll work. We may need to
Because
expand.
libertarian is such a broad term,
It is.
and it is used by so many people. Maybe we should consider the perspective that this is a person who, an individualist, a person. My definition of a libertarian is plain and simple: someone who believes that individual rights
Okay.
are the only rights that exist,
Okay.
and that any form of statism is an infringement
Okay.
by its very virtue on that right.
Okay.
Only an individual can own property. Only an individual has rights.
Okay.
And any government, the more government you have, the more infringement on that natural right you're going to have. I
Okay.
believe that's probably the most fair, universal definition of a principled libertarian. Now,
So so
again,
let's so
I'm sure
let's
you'll have
let's
plenty
so
of
let's lock it.
minarchists in your comments that
Sure.
will disagree. But that's the point: less state, more liberty; more state, less liberty,
Okay. So let's try.
and the individual's rights being paramount. I think that's a pretty fair, broad description of libertarianism. Would you agree?
I would. It would be helpful for me as we continue this on, for us to for us to lock it down into one or two sentences, uh, if we could. So how
Mhm.
about, could we go with let me take a stab at this, and tell me if you agree with this. A principled libertarian would be
Ben, can
a.
you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hello, Vin. Can
Hello,
you
hello,
hear me?
hello. I can hear you. We can hear you.
Audio.
Are we losing? I can hear you. I can definitely hear you. Conan, I can hear you. I can hear you. I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? No, he lost audio here. Oh gosh. Hello, hello. Oh, can you hear me? We can try to reconnect. We can try to reconnect this thing. Let me turn this off and then back on. Hello, hello. Hello, 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 hello. No. No? Can you hear me? No? Yeah, okay. Let's try. We'll reconnect and then we'll connect back. Let's see. Get him back here. Let's see. Woo. That is crazy. Oh, he's gone. Let's see if we can get him back. And let's see. Let's see. No. Hello. Hello. Oh, now I can't hear you.
Okay, how about
Oh,
now?
there we go. Perfect. Okay.
That's what happened, bro. I'm so sorry.
That's it's
It
all
just
it's
all of a
all
sudden
good.
went mute on me.
It's all
The
good, dude.
last thing I remembered was I had said that, basically that a libertarian is someone who treats individual rights as paramount.
Okay.
That's the only place where individual rights are.
Okay.
That was my generalized description.
Okay. Principled libertarian, just so that I can have the definition, so that we're moving forward, uh, talking about the same thing. A principled libertarian is someone who believes that individual rights are paramount.
Absolutely,
Okay.
that's fair.
So then the question is, can someone who believes that individual rights are paramount uh, at the same time be a person who shows or feels discrimination or prejudice against people of other races, or who believes that a particular race is superior to another? I don't see those as mutually exclusive concepts, but maybe if you want to elaborate on why you think they are.
Sure. Well, many people have spoken before me. I usually take these ideas that other people have and try to put them in a more easy to relate to format for the everyday layman. What happens here is because, as you pointed out, racism is the discrimination or prejudice against another people based solely on their race,
Mm-hmm.
which is, in essence, that is a collectivist idea. It runs contrary to any idea of individual rights. If you are an individualist, you have to acknowledge that each individual is the sum of their actions and no others, not their ancestors, not their relatives, not other people who may vaguely resemble them.
Mm-hmm.
That is an idea born of collectivism. One of my favorite comparisons would be the term barnyard collectivism, which is the idea of someone who can discern the differences between different species of animals,
Mm-hmm.
but cannot discern the difference between animals and humans.
Okay.
And what we mean by that is that you have categorized as tribalism. You categorize people into groups,
Mm-hmm.
and behind every racist, you're always going to find a form of a certain personal insecurity. When you don't have anything that you've built yourself, when you don't have anything that you as an individual have accomplished, is when you lean towards these atavistic systems. The whole, well, I think it was Ayn Rand that made the point of defending a rapist or a murderer from justice because you want to maintain the good family name. That's another form or brand of racism. It's simply supplanting race for family or heritage or hierarchy. And these things are inherently collectivist in nature, just based on their virtue. The reason that libertarianism and racism cannot coincide is because you're eventually going to have a conflict where the old cognitive dissonance comes into effect, where you're going to have to make a choice. There's going to come a fork in the road where you're going to have to make a decision that's either going to be based on a collectivist train of thought or a libertarian individualist train of thought. Those two cannot coexist in the same space. It is physically impossible to do so. Any person that has any level of education can tell you those two are absolutely diametrically opposed. And at
Which
any
which
point,
two
you're
are
going to come to
diametrically opposed, just so that I understand?
collectivism and individualism.
Okay, and racism, and so can we define collectivism then? Because I want to be sure on that.
Sure.
Because by the way,
Yeah, I saw you mentioned. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think, yeah, I absolutely agree, and I don't think anybody would disagree that collectivism and individualism are actually technically opposites of each other, and that those are
Hmm.
mutually exclusive. So, uh, if you could, let's see if we can find, because I think my definition of
Right. So
collectivism is a little bit different than
sure.
your definition of collectivism. So this is the definition that, just by typing in collectivism, that I found, that it is the practice or principle of giving a group priority over each individual in it. Each individual in it.
Sure.
Are you okay with that?
That's right.
Okay. So
Right. And so let's
how
look at
is
what that actually means.
what's that?
I said, let's look at what that actually means.
Okay. Yeah.
The
Let's take a
point
look.
that they make here, yeah, it says that of giving a group priority over each
Mm-hmm.
individual in it. A group, and the word priority over each individual in it.
Mm-hmm.
So what this means is that, for example, in making a judgment of an individual, you will not judge that person based on what he or she has done, but you will base them on the collective group that you associate them with. And you make your judgments of them based on that collective group association.
No, I'm not
That is
necessarily
why
sure that that's the
racism is the
meaning.
most basic form of collectivism.
I'm not necessarily sure that that's the meaning of collectivism, even as it's being used in this case, because right underneath it, it says the theory and practice of the ownership of land and the means of
Mhm.
production by the people or the state. So, I mean,
Sure, and that they provide two different definitions for that specific reason, because collectivism can be used in multiple forms because it is a form of thought, right? So just
so
like
here's the
the
Merriam-Webster. Let's do Merriam-Webster here, because
sure.
this is technically, so there's only one definition actually. Well, no, there's two. So let's take a look here. So what we have is
Right,
the main.
and as you see on Merriam-Webster, you'll see with the second definition, they provide a second definition because one is commonly used to define an economic situation.
Right.
White nationalism,
Mm-hmm.
for example, that would fall under the Merriam-Webster definition one, a political or economic theory advocating for a collective.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the philosophical or the personal when it comes to schools of thought, the way that we think and interact on. And that is where you get emphasis on a collective rather than an individual action or identity. That's more along the lines of racism, because this is going on a person-by-person treatment rather than this large political idea. If you have a group of cultists, for example, that's a collective, and they have a collectivist mind state.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't have any. They're not someone that's trying to move forward with a political, economic agenda. In this case, the reason that racism and collectivism are one and the same is that collectivism is a very broad word that can be used in many different forms, right? As an adjective, as a verb. But in this case, racism is a form, a derivative of collectivism.
Okay, so let's
just as statism is inherently a derivative of collectivism.
Sure. So let's I'm trying to dig into this, because I think what we need to do then is, if we could address, because individualism and collectivism, as we've said, are definitely they are opposed to one another. Okay, and if you are going to use this, if we are going to define emphasis on collective rather than individual action, or I'm still not. I got to tell you, I'm not altogether convinced that this is describing a
racism.
That this is describing discrimination or prejudice against people of other races. I'm not altogether sure that emphasis on collective rather than individual action or identity is altogether the same thing as discrimination or prejudice against people of other races. But let's try to unpack this a little bit. So, would you say that discrimination or prejudice, period? Maybe we could start there. So, can you be a libertarian, and can you discriminate based on some factors. So can I be a libertarian, and for instance, can I say certain people cannot come in my business?
Well, of course you can. If you're, well, you mean you can live in a libertarian society and say whatever
Well,
you
no,
have
I'm saying
freedom of
not in a
association.
libertarian society. I'm saying me right now. Like, I'm a libertarian, right? I'm a libertarian.
What certain people?
Certain people based on, let's say certain people based on their political views. So let's say that
Okay.
I said people who were, let's say people who were statists, or people who were wearing
Okay.
American flags, let's say. Would
Okay.
I be able
You
to
don't want them in your store.
say no American flags, no American flag apparel allowed in my store? Could I say that and still be a libertarian?
Of course you could.
Okay.
That
So
American flag is not a race or ethnicity.
okay.
That is a symbol. That's a
Okay.
product of culture. And as Ayn Rand pointed out, culture is not just some random thing that was produced by collectives. It is the product of several different individuals together. Someone's ideology is the thing you're supposed to use when you discriminate.
Okay.
People use the word discriminate and automatically associate it with racism, but
So
that's not the case.
I guess my question though is, wouldn't that if I was to discriminate against people? So, for instance, if I was to say you're not allowed in my store, um,
Mhm.
because you're wearing an American flag shirt, but I don't know the individual at all. I haven't met them. I'm not judging based on the individual. I'm judging based on some physical characteristic external to that.
Are you basing it on their ideology?
Is that okay? So let's pick something else. I'm trying to draw right now. I'm trying to
Sure,
draw a
sure.
boundary
Right.
around
Right.
where
My
you're
point is
coming
that
in
if
at.
you're discriminating on them because they wear an American flag as a symbol of their statism,
Mm-hmm.
and you do not want status in your store because they're dangerous people,
Well,
then
let's
no,
not get
that's
into
not just.
the reason, right? Because I think
Okay, it doesn't matter. You just don't want them there. That's fine.
right,
That's
right,
fair enough. You don't want statists in your store.
right.
Statism is an ideology,
Okay.
right? It's something that a person chooses and takes upon themselves. These are thoughts that are in their mind.
Well, we've got it.
It has nothing to do with
We don't
their
need to go
parents having
further.
sex when you're
I think we get it. So you're saying
right.
just walk with me here. We don't need to go too far down each one of these things, right? I'm trying to draw a boundary of and trying to understand where you're coming from here. So I'm going to need to ask some questions to do that, and I don't want to go too long. So discrimination on basis of ideology. So discrimination on basis of what someone believes is acceptable. So religion is a belief. How about discrimination along religion? Since you say it's okay for me to discriminate based on ideology, what if I was to say no Jews allowed in this store?
Now, here we go. This is where it gets spicy. All right. So if you choose not to have a person in your store because of their ideology,
Yes.
and religion does fall under an ideology,
Mm-hmm.
you said you don't want to go into why, but why is very important.
Well, can we go into the difference
that's the
between?
point of
Can
what
we go
makes
into the difference
something
between a?
prejudicial or not?
Okay, can we go into the difference between an American, let's say, an American flag and wearing an American flag shirt as a symbol of your belief, and let's say wearing a Star of David around your neck as a symbol of your Jewish belief? But so you're saying it's totally okay for me as a libertarian to prevent the person wearing the flag from coming in. Is it similarly okay then to prevent the person wearing the Star of David? And if not, why not?
Potentially yes on both counts, and potentially no on both counts. Intent matters in this sort of case. If you genuinely feel that statists are dangerous individuals, they have the potential for violence, they feel justified in harming other people, this most basic principle that you have learned since you were a child is not okay, then no one could hold you as a bigot because you choose not to associate with that type of people.
Well, what if I feel what if I feel that way about Jews because of the way that the state of Israel treats Palestinians? Am I justified in not allowing Jews to come into my store?
You're just uneducated. You're not a racist. You're not a bigot. You're not an anti-Semite. You're just uneducated.
But
I
could I
have
be a
nothing but love for
libertarian?
many of my Jewish
Could,
friends, but see, Israel. I'm just saying it is kind of a catch-22. But see, Israel is not Jews. Okay, they're not the same thing. Israel is a state. Moreover, it's an ethno-state. It's a white nationalist wet dream, is what it is. So
okay.
it's not the same. Being anti-Zionist is not
Well,
anti-Semitic. All
how
right,
about
Israel is a
Israelis?
dangerous place for a lot of people.
How about saying, okay, then how about saying I will not allow is the Star of David is a symbol of the state of Israel. It's on their flag. So
Sure. The swastika is a symbol of Germanic cults, and it didn't have anything to do with Nazis. They just snatched the symbol, bro. I mean,
right. So but what I'm asking you is
that doesn't make the two the same.
can I? So you said so. I just because I'm trying to understand this here, okay? And I'm not. I don't feel like I'm quite clear. You said I can be a principled libertarian and not allow someone in because they're wearing a symbol of a country. Now, regardless of what they've done, maybe they've never done any violence in their entire life. But you said, as a libertarian,
Right.
because I feel that the U.S. state is dangerous, that I would be justified and it would be legitimate for me as a libertarian to prevent someone wearing the American flag from entering my store. I'm justified in that, right?
No, not exactly. Because
Okay, because you had said
we
before that
agreed
I
up until
was.
the point that you said white is irrelevant, and that's when I pumped the brakes and said no, white is irrelevant.
Okay.
The intent is relevant. It's not about whether or not he's wearing an American flag. Okay, It's about whether or not you find if he is a statist.
Okay.
If he openly proclaims that he is a statist individual and he is in favor of the state using force to force you to his collective will, then you have every right to fear for yourself and not want that around and not want that to influence or to cater to that business because you find it ethically wrong.
But that would
and you have a right to be concerned.
Sure.
Now, that's a difference between saying any guy who has a certain logo on their shirt can't come in my store because that's not the same thing.
So that's what I want to address then. So what I want is an answer from you then, because I guess now the answer is a little bit different. So what I want from you is, well, at first you said that I would be justified as a libertarian to not allow people wearing American flags into my store. So let me step back and let me ask the question again. If I have never met a person in my life, right? I'm not judging them as an individual. They've never talked to me before. Can I, as a libertarian, be acting as a libertarian and discriminate and say, people, if you're wearing an American flag, you cannot come into my store? Can I be a libertarian and say that?
Let's see. Can you say no one's allowed to wear American flags in your store?
Right.
Sure. That's not racist. If they don't like it, they don't have to shop at your store. I mean, they can just change their shirt or go somewhere else.
Okay. And
because at that point they're endorsing an ideology that you find repugnant.
Okay.
It would be and for that reason and that reason only. What it seems like you're trying to do is trying to get me to lean towards you saying, well, this person hasn't done this or that. No, that person has ascribed to that ideology, and you don't want that ideology in your business because you find it violent and dangerous and unethical.
Okay, so
and that is appropriate.
So if I find an ideology violent and dangerous and unethical, I am allowed to prevent people wearing symbols of that ideology from entering my place of business, and I would still be a libertarian in your view. Is that true?
Yes,
okay.
That would be true.
So
because you're acting in the sake of your own self-protection, based on someone's ideas, things they think themselves, not some innate.
We've got that. So then, would I be justified as a libertarian if I find the ideology that is, let's say, the religion of Judaism, the religion of Islam? Would I be justified as a libertarian then to say anyone wearing an Islamic symbol or a Star of David is not allowed? It's an ideology. There is violence definitely perpetrated in the name of both of those ideologies and has been for thousands of years when you combine the two of them. So I'm asking, would I be justified then to say if you're wearing a Star of David or any outward symbol of the ideology of either Islam or Judaism, you may not come into my store? Would I be justified as a libertarian in doing that?
If you allowed any other organized religion in your store and excluded these, you would be logically inconsistent and a bigot. By your train of thought, you would be within your rights to do so, but every organized religion is responsible for violence, literally every single one, because
Sure.
organized religions are collectives
Well, would I be
who
would I would
place
I
the
be a
collective priority over the individual. So if you were to, I'm answering your question. So if you were to say that Islam is a violent ideology because they said some bad things in their books a long time ago that I don't agree with, or that Judaism is a violent ideology because they said and did bad things, and in some isolated places still do
Mhm.
practice what I find to be barbaric practices, uh, then, but then you were to exclude Christians who have, murdered women at a stake just so they could steal her property and call her a witch, and all these other horrible, horrible things. We don't even have to go into what they did to the
Let's
kids on
let's
the
say I
res at those
excluded
schools.
all
So
let's
if
say
you
I
would allow
excluded
those
all
people
religious
but
symbols.
exclude these others, that'd be inconsistent.
Okay, let's say then that I excluded which ones is not important to me. I'm trying to get at a principle
Right.
here, right? And I'm trying to understand where you're
Sure.
coming from. Let's say that I
Right.
excluded all symbols of all religions, period. I said you may
Mm.
not wear a religious symbol of any kind just because I'm an atheist. Let's say I'm an atheist and I say all religions, like Sam Harris does. Sam Harris says all religions are violent. All religion itself creates
Yep.
violence. Okay, let me do Sam Harris. Would I be justified in saying if you are wearing some symbol of a religion, any
Some religious
religion,
symbol.
you are not allowed into my store? Would that be
Not only would you
libertarian?
be a
Could I be a
principled
libertarian and do that?
libertarian, you,
I can be a
I'd also
libertarian and do
have
that.
advanced tickets.
I can be a libertarian and do
I'd
that.
eat there every day.
Okay. So
Yes,
so
you
so
can.
we agree I can be a libertarian and do that.
Sure.
Okay.
That's
So
not racism.
okay. Well, let's. I'm trying to get away from. I'm just. What I'm actually trying to gain right here is I'm trying to understand. Let's see. I'm trying to understand this, right? Discrimination or
Right.
prejudice. I'm trying to understand if it's the discrimination and prejudice. If I can discriminate and prejudge individuals based on certain things and still be a libertarian, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so I think we've established right now that I can discriminate against people who adhere to a religion. So in other words, people who adhere to a religion and wear a symbol of that religion, I can say
Right.
I can discriminate against them, no problem.
Sure. I think it's fair to say that wearing a symbol of a religion is an endorsement of that
Okay.
religion. So, yes, I think you would be fair in saying that I don't want anyone coming in my store that, advances that ideology
Okay. So
for the moral reasons we mentioned earlier.
okay. So let's say let's say they weren't wearing a symbol necessarily, but I could identify them with that religion. Let's say, for instance, that I had seen them coming out of a church, right? I had seen them leaving a church service, and
Mhm.
I saw them the next day. They tried to come into my business, and I said, I do not allow religious people into my store because religions have been violent in the past, and you are obviously of this religion. You came out of this church. Would I be? They clearly endorsed the religion, and you said discriminating because someone endorses a religion is okay from a libertarian standpoint. So would that be? Could I be a libertarian and do that?
All right. And we're speaking in the most strictest terms possible. Could you tell a person that because you knew for a fact that they were of a religion,
Mm-hmm.
that they couldn't come in your store? Uh, and I get it, and I know that you would never take that point
I
personally.
wouldn't.
It
I
is quite a
personally
stretch.
wouldn't.
You're just trying to get to the root of the issue. I understand.
I am.
So what I would point out is that if you, well, for just a quick dose of realism here, no libertarian's going to do that, right? The whole point is that we know our ideas are superior, and therefore we would never give up the arena that we can always win, which is in logical
Would it
debate.
make me
But
not
yes,
a libertarian
for the sake
though?
of this hypothetical situation, I'm sorry.
Would it make me not? Would it make me not a principled
Yes.
libertarian if I were to do that, or is that within the bounds of something that that I could still qualify as a principled libertarian for doing?
Right. I don't believe you could do that and qualify yourself as a principled libertarian for the same reason that if I were to go to a political rally, you couldn't just automatically label me a status scum that you didn't want in your store, right? That's not an indicator of religion. I don't practice any organized religion, but I attend churches on the occasion. I find it to be fascinating observation of human behavior.
Okay.
And I'm not an atheist either. I'm more, I guess you would call me an old school deist sort of style. I'm sure he's there. I just don't really think he's that concerned. But yes, to do that would be making an assumption of a person without actually knowing that of that person.
Okay. So
And that would not be consistent with judging an individual based on their individual ideas and views.
Okay. So I just want to get this clear because I am a little confused here. All right. And the reason why I'm
All right.
confused is that
Let me try to make this point because you seem to be confused about a lot. Let's look at it like this.
well, hold on,
These are not two different claims.
hold on.
All right, man.
Here's the thing. I'm trying to understand what is
waiting
acceptable
for this,
discrimination and still libertarian and what is not. We've established that you said no problem for a principled libertarian to discriminate based on a symbol that someone is wearing, because wearing that symbol is necessarily an endorsement of a religion. Now, I am not a religious individual. In fact, I consider myself to be agnostic, whatever, but I wear crosses all the time. And I wear Stars of David as symbols, as jewelry. And so I don't endorse those religions. And you just said that coming out
Well,
of
you're right. Ozzy does too.
What's that?
So I said, oh, you're right. I mean, Ozzy does also. Like a lot of people, it's not common, but yeah, it does happen that a person would wear an icon of a religion. But that is, you and Mr. Osborne are most definitely in the minority. However, you may be right. You are correct. Just as I pointed out that just because someone attends a church doesn't automatically make them of that faith. I suppose you're correct that it would be an unfair assumption of a person to automatically assume that they were a form of an organized religion because they were wearing jewelry. I'll concede you that point. But I think we're missing the actual point.
So let's back up then.
Oh my gosh. Okay, man.
Well, so then is it or is it not? Because before you had said I would be totally within as a principled libertarian, within those principles to exclude someone from coming into my store because they were wearing a religious symbol. Is that still...
Yeah, and then I admitted that you were right and that I was wrong. I know you're not used to that, but you're right. If a person is wearing jewelry and you even though it is the largest of minorities and so unlikely to happen, if you do make the assumption that a person's clothing or jewelry is automatically indicative of something that they believe or something that you may find harmful or dangerous, then yes, you would be wrong in making that assumption because there is always the possibility that they're just wearing it for funsies. Right? I don't know. Furthermore, you could also say, well, it doesn't matter if you practice that religion or not. I don't want that religion endorsed. And that's what that symbol indicates. I don't want it in my store. I don't want my kids being influenced by cults. It's cool that you can wear that and you're not influenced by that. I'm happy, but I don't want it in my store. I don't want it around me. But the point that we're trying to get to is that the reason is because in order to practice racism, you must make a judgment of a person based on actions performed. That's the end game of what racism is. And as an individualist, as a person who thinks that every single person is the merit of their individual respective actions, regardless of what silly hypotheticals we come up with, the point comes to you will eventually, when interacting with other humans, have a crossroads where you have to either make a judgment that's going to be based on their race, their ethnicity. Obviously, every time you look at a person, the first thing your brain recognizes, number one is usually gender, number two is usually race, and number three is usually age. This is biology, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make you racist. What makes racism versus an individualist, and the reason they're incompatible, is because you will come to a point where you have to make a judgment, a decision, an action, whatever you want to call it, that will either go one way or the other. You will either make that judgment based on what information you have as to what that person's abilities are, or you will make a judgment based on your collective assumptions of them based on their appearance and nothing more. And that is where they cannot coincide. One will yield to the other every time. It is impossible to uphold both of those when the rubber hits the road. It's all good in thought and practice in your head, but once you try to apply it to real life, you will always come to a point where you will either have to make a decision that leans more to a collectivist ideology or thought, or an individualist ideology or thought. Every time.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. You've said it a couple times. I'm trying to understand, though. See, let's go back to this definition of racist, because I'm still it still is muddy to me here. We've got a person who shows or feels discrimination. So how about this? Person who shows or feels discrimination or prejudice. So let's say you feel discrimination or prejudice against people of other races, or who believes, let's say you believe that a particular race is superior to another. Would you be a racist by what you're talking about? If by simply believing that, let's say I were to say, you know what, white people are superior to all other races, or let's say I say I'm Chinese, and I say Chinese are superior to all other races, and all other races are less than we Chinese people. Would I be a racist?
Yes.
Okay. And due to that, so for that racist person, the supremacist, you're saying that they cannot be a principled libertarian, if I understand this, because they believe one race to be superior means that they cannot respect the individual rights of other races. Do I have that right?
No, it is because it is the notion of ascribing moral, social, or political significance to a man's genetic lineage. The notion that a man's intellectual and characterological traits are produced and transmitted by his internal body chemistry, which means in practice that a man is to be judged not by his own character and actions, but by the characters and actions of a collective of ancestors.
Okay.
That's ridiculous. That's what racism is.
I
That's
agree.
what the idea of supremacy
I
is.
agree.
And,
I agree. I agree. It's
obviously
ridiculous.
inconsistent with individualist thought.
I agree. It's ridiculous, and I think most people know what racism is. I'm pretty sure, and I think we're both in agreement that it is not good, and I do not.
But you don't think that racism is a form of collectivism? That's what you're telling me.
Well, I'm not altogether sure that the collectivism, the way that I use it. And I mean, I just spent about a third of my most recent book is on collectivism. And the collectivism as I use it, specifically when we're talking about libertarianism, is specifically meant to illustrate that there is a mode of thought that says that a collective can actually own things. That a collective can't, so for instance, a state, a corporation, that a fictitious entity can have rights. Whereas an individualist says, no, only individuals have rights. And the reason only individuals have rights or can own property, only individuals can claim property. I spent a long time, and I'll send you a copy of my book if you'd like. I spent a very, very long time going through
this. That's fantastic. Thank you.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm confused, is because, look, I've been operating under a certain definition of collectivism. I'm not quite. I'm willing to try to walk through and understand your definition.
And you're not wrong.
Okay.
Sure. Oh, and you're right. Your definition of collectivism is accurate. You're not wrong.
Okay.
Think about it like this. Take the exact definition and the explanation you just gave us of collectivism, and you're right. Now replace the words rights or properties. Let's take those, rights and properties, because that's where it divides. All right. Let's replace that with achievements. Right.
Okay.
That's just one example. And there's racism. By achievements, I mean things that you don't physically own, things that you accomplished. I did that. I built this, right?
Okay.
So there it goes again. This is where collectivism, it comes into people's actions. You look at the cumulative actions of a person's race or a person's ethnicity in order to judge them as an individual. And that is racist for the same reason that if you were to say, well, black people don't deserve to be able to vote, right? because they only should count for 2/3 of a vote, or any of these other
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous assertions that people have made in the past that we now know is ridiculous, right? So if you were to just take that and look at it in the same modern perspective, that's collectivism.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is.
I don't think we
Because you
disagree.
are attributing it to an individual.
I don't think we disagree there. Honestly, I think clearly we don't disagree, because there's no libertarian on the face of the earth that would ever say that anyone, regardless, should not have the right to vote. It should be universal. A libertarian would say, if we're going to vote, which I don't think a principled libertarian was really a status, but for this example, that if we're gonna vote, it needs to be universal suffrage. A libertarian would say that the rule of law should apply to all people, regardless of anything. So we're on the same page there. We're on the same page there. I guess what I'm trying to understand is there's two sides of this, and I would agree that judging that implementing policies based on and giving racial discrimination in terms of policies like you just described is clearly not libertarian. But really, it's not libertarian to discriminate based on anything, right? So it would be like, if it was who gets to vote, it would be non-libertarian to discriminate based on height, based on education, based on religion, based on anything, right? It would be universal suffrage. So like, discrimination against people for any reason is not libertarian, right? We agree on that. I think we agree on that, right? And discriminating based on race would certainly qualify. I guess where I'm a little bit confused on this, and I guess maybe it's because I'm hearing the question a little bit differently. The question that I'm hearing, and let me see if I can articulate this right, is, can a person who is a racist, right? Can a person who in their head is like, I hate this particular race of people, right? That it's like, could you in your head, and I think this is important because I think that this actually happens. Could you in your head be like, I hate Mexicans, whatever it is. I hate Mexicans. They're terrible people. They're dirty, they're smelly, they're this, I don't like them, they need to speak English, I don't like any of that. But yet, could you behave toward the Mexicans that you met in a way that would be respecting their property rights? In other words, could you, respect their private, if you had a next door neighbor, right? Could you respect his private property?
Well, I see what you're saying. Could a person who is racist still respect the property rights of a person whom they felt personal disdain for?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and is that what you're asking? Yeah, and that happens all the time. There's plenty of racist old white dudes who don't like black people or Mexicans, and then a black or Mexican family moves in next door. And you know what usually happens after a while? He usually comes around, because he usually realizes, they're just people with kids, lives, and mortgages and shit. But no, I see your point. Yeah, but that goes back to, he could, by respect, that means what's the difference between being a principled libertarian versus living as a law-abiding person in a libertarian society. They're not the same. That guy would not be a principled libertarian. He sounds like a good neighbor. He'd leave me the fuck alone. I like that. But no, he would not be a principled libertarian, because he has made a judgment of these people based on their race. He could just be an ignorant libertarian, but you can't make a judgment. If you were to say, he could say, every Mexican person I have met has been this, that, or the third. And so I'm inclined to think this of many of people, because that's just some of your experience. But if you don't have the intellect to recognize that individuals are a product of more than their genetics, or that people can have different views than other people they happen to grow up within, then you're missing the entire point of being an objectivist, of being an individualist, of
See, I don't think we disagree.
You have to prove to me that racism is not collectivism, basically. The only way you will ever convince me that a libertarian can be a racist simultaneously is to show me that racism is not collectivism. I know you're not here to convince me, but that's what I would require. because that's what I see it as. That's my equation.
I think so. We don't actually need to define racism anymore. I'm pretty sure I know what it is. You know what it is, and we both have already said we do not like it. I'd like to try to move through this and reach somewhere where there's some kernel that might actually be helpful for people listening. So I want to address this issue because I do think it is important. Because I think it gets to the core of what is it to be a libertarian, and is it so because it seems to me that puts a very that's really a strain that it puts, and maybe it seems to expand out the idea of libertarianism beyond where I'm really comfortable with it being. And so let me kind of go back to this idea of if someone in their head, because that's what racism is, right? It's a belief. It's a belief that a particular race is superior to another. So it's a belief. It's something that goes on in your head. But if you walk through your life, and I do believe that people do this quite a bit, like for various different reasons, whether for professionalism or whatever, but I don't really see a conflict with the idea that while I may think that one race is superior to another, that I still respect the individual rights of everyone regardless of their race. So even though I do, if I were to say, yes, this race is superior, I would be a racist. But I don't see that as preventing me from respecting the rights of every individual. I don't see how those two things are mutually exclusive. Maybe you could help me out with that.
Sure. The reason is because there's more to being a libertarian than leaving people alone and not stealing their shit.
Okay, go on.
I know we preach that it's a simple ideology, and it is, and it's good that we keep it as simple as possible. The more complicated something gets, the easier it is to lie about it. But there's more to being a libertarian than leaving people alone.
Okay.
Libertarianism is based on a school of thought. It's based on the recognition, the reason that we leave people alone, the reason that we don't hurt people and take their stuff, is because of our belief in natural law. If you believe in natural law, if you read Locke, if you read Rand, follow the individualist ideology, and then you have to recognize that it is absolutely impossible in a thought process. An educated person cannot believe that an individual is the sum of his ethnicity, and also an individual is the sum of his actions and accomplishments. This is absolutely fundamentally incompatible.
Are you there? Lose you? Are you still there?
I am here.
Okay. So
nope, you got me.
Okay, right good. So yeah, on individualism, I get that too. Just wrote a book on it, self-ownership. You could probably tell by the title that's exactly what it's about. So I got you. I'm there with you. I'm an individualist, and again, I agree that racism is bad. I'm just trying to I'm trying to get a grasp because I haven't really I guess I haven't really heard libertarianism described this way, that someone could fully respect the property rights of others and through their actions push that property rights of others were respected, and yet that person, in your opinion, wouldn't be a libertarian if they believed that one race was superior to another. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, and it's based on a logical fallacy.
Okay, go ahead.
You can't be an individual. It's possible to be an individualist and a collectivist simultaneously. You and I both agreed on that earlier. So basically what we've got is we know that you cannot be an individualist and a collectivist. And so therefore, if the argument is that can one be a libertarian and a racist, the only way that's possible is you would have to give me a scenario where a person can both have a collectivist thought and an individualist thought. I don't see how those two coincide. If racism is a collectivist ideology, which I think in its inherent nature it most obviously is, because it's a judgment of a group of people as a collective rather than the individual based on their own merit, then that is absolutely the opposite, the polar opposite of individualism, which is the cornerstone of libertarian thought. It's the reason we even bother to come up with a non-aggression principle to begin with, is because our recognition of the individual and their identity, not just their property, but their identity, who they are. They are a accumulation of themselves. And again, I've read a lot of your work, and you are spot on, and you get it nailed on the head. I think that's the problem I need. I need you or anyone out there to show me that racism is not collectivism. How can you possibly?
Uh-oh. Kind of losing you. Hold on. Okay, go back. We're kind of losing you there. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
How's that?
Better. Okay, good. Go ahead.
So what I would need is, if we have confirmed that collectivism and individualism don't jive and cannot coincide at the same thought process, the same action at the same time, and we've confirmed that individualism is a cornerstone of libertarian thought, and you have to be an individualist in order to even, that's the reason libertarianism exists, is because of the individualist concept, then I guess what I would need is for someone to show me that you could be a racist and not a collectivist. Like, you would have to prove to me that racism is not collectivism, because racism is the most obvious example of it. It's the most basic, dumbed down, watered down example of collectivism out there. It doesn't even require economy. It doesn't require religion. It doesn't require hierarchy or who your family was. It's just what color you were born. That guy looks like me. Boom, there you go. That's like the most basic form of collectivism. So in order for you to convince me that a person could be a principle practicing libertarian and be a racist, you have to show me that racism is not collectivist. And I think that's a pretty tough challenge, man.
Okay. Well, yeah, and it's not a challenge that I'm going to take on any further today. So do you feel good that that sort of I've heard your argument here, and you feel good that you've sort of laid it out satisfactorily?
Absolutely.
Okay,
And I
good.
can't tell you how much I appreciate you for having me on the show.
Sure, great. Thank you. I'm gonna take off, but again, thank you very much for coming on, and I guess I'll probably see you online.
Oh, you definitely will. Anytime you ever need anything, brother, you know where I'm at. Give
All
me
right.
a call. And
Excellent.
again, thank you so much for having me.
All right, dude. Thanks, Conan.